Rav Shimshon Pincus was nifter, so somebody said, I think it was at the Levaya, in the course of Rav Pincus' lifetime, one of his sons said that he never saw his father open a window that somebody else had closed. He never saw him close a window that somebody else had opened. Everybody knows the Beis Hamikdash was destroyed, the second Beis Hamikdash, because of Sinas Chinam, which has to be understood exactly what Sinas Chinam is. There's also tremendous Sinah for Talmidei Chachamim, more than anything else. But there are certainly the interpersonal relationships that need improvement. And somebody like a Pincus comes along, or Pincus Latzal, think about that he never opened a window that somebody else closed, no matter how uncomfortable he was. He never closed the window somebody else had opened. Think that people are at their unreasonable best when it comes to temperature, and the person asks himself, there are a lot of chasadim I could do, and there's a lot of things I would do for other people. Just as one little example, the idea of, I'm not comfortable, therefore the matzav has to change.
And therefore, we all know that when a baby is born, a baby only knows one thing. A baby, when he's born, only knows that he exists. That's all he knows of. Everybody around him, he doesn't know the people. He only knows that he exists, has needs, and needs have to be taken care of right now. As human beings, we are definitely I-focused. We are focused on ourselves from the day we're born. Some people live their entire lives in that infant state. But we are people who are focused on ourselves. And obviously, when a Tisha B'Av comes along, as Rav Margolin mentioned, and Rav Taub mentioned, a day when we want to try to draw back, ask ourselves, where can we improve? What is the day about? And particularly this area of Bein Adam Lachavero, which is the cause of the Churban, and Rav Hirsch says that if we behave in a way that would prevent the Churban of the rebuilding of the Beis HaMikdash, then it's as if we have destroyed the Beis HaMikdash. So everybody knows the Gemara in Gittin that says, Maisa bivno vitosh Rabbi Shmuel ben Elisha, the son and daughter of Rabbi Shmuel ben Elisha, shenishbu l'shtei adonim. They were captured by two Roman masters. And the two men met one day, and he said, I have a slave whose beauty is unmatched in the entire world. The other one said, I have a maidservant whose beauty is unmatched in the entire world. So they decided, let's marry them to each other, and we'll divide the offspring, we'll be able to sell them, and we'll make the profits. They put them together in a room, and he sat in one corner of the room, and she sat in the other corner of the room. And he said, Ani Kohen ben Kohanim Gedolim. I'm a Kohen, the son of Kohanim, I descend from Kohanim Gedolim. Esa, Shifcha, I'm going to marry a maidservant. Zoso Meres Ani Kohenes Bas Kohanim Gedolim. I descend from Kohanim Gedolim, and Nosei Le'eved, I should marry a slave. And they were there in the dark room. Ubachu kol halayla, they cried the entire night. Kevan she'olah amud hashachar, when it became sunlight, he kiru zeh, they recognized each other, v'naflu zeh al zeh. They fell into each other's arms, v'go b'vchiyah sheyatza nishmasa. And they cried until their neshamas left them. Ve'al eile konein yirmiyah, al eile ani bochiyah. Eini yordamayim. Very touching story. The son and the daughter are in the room. And they cried all night. I'm going to marry an Eved, I'm going to marry a Shifcha. And then it's daybreak. And all of a sudden he recognizes, you know what? She's not a Shifcha, that's my sister. And she sees him. It's not an Eved, it's my brother. And they cried, and they died. Why'd they cry? What were they crying about? Sure, it's emotion. What are they crying about exactly? What exactly is there to cry about here? So there are two answers to that question. The first is, I believe that they're crying for themselves. There's another Jew in close proximity, and to me he looks like an Eved, to me he looks like a Shifcha. It's another Jew in close proximity. I don't even see him. And when one day I finally see him, I cry because I realize who was nearby and it wasn't the person that I thought. That's worth crying, but not crying for him, crying for myself. A Jew living close to me, and I've judged him a certain way, and I look at him a certain way. And I may disagree with his shita, which is fine if his shita is krum. But not the Jew. There's a Jew there. He's a person, a human being. Rav Avram Genachovsky was Rosh Yeshiva, the Chibin Yeshiva. He had a chavrusa on Leil Shabbos. And Avrech used to come to his house to learn with him. So one Leil Shabbos, this Avrech comes walking up to the door, and he forgot that it was Shabbos. He rang the doorbell. He was very embarrassed. He just rang Rosh Yeshiva's doorbell. Nothing happened. He waited a couple of minutes. He started knocking on the door. He knocked and he knocked. And he knocked for about 10 minutes. After 10 minutes, Rav Genachovsky comes to the door in his pajamas. His eyes are red and bleary. He opens the door. He says, "I'm terribly sorry. I was so tired after the Suda. I forgot we had a chavrusa. I got into bed. I went to sleep. I heard you're knocking at the door. So I opened the door." After he was nifter, his family said, he didn't forget he had a chavrusa. Rav Avram Genachovsky never forgot about a chavrusa. Fish don't forget they need water. Rav Genachovsky heard the doorbell ring. And as soon as he heard the doorbell ring, he realized if I answer that doorbell, he's going to be very embarrassed. So he got in, he'll be embarrassed that I saw he rang a doorbell on Shabbos. He got into his pajamas, he went into bed, and he pretended to be sleeping until he heard the knocking, so he could tell the Avrech that the knocking was what woke him up. So we wonder, how do we get to the level of Rav Pincus? How do we get to the level of Rav Avram Genachovsky? That we realize there are other Jews in our world. That we see them before the sunlight. We see them right away. We're aware that there are other Jews. So the Torah says that when Moshe Rabbeinu was appointed, he said to HaKadosh Baruch Hu, "Please, take my brother instead of me. He's the older brother, he'll be jealous. I'm going to get all the covet, I'll be the leader. Shlachna biyad tishlach." HaKadosh Baruch Hu says to Moshe Rabbeinu, "You're making a mistake over here. He will not be jealous. He will not be consumed with kina, like you think. V'racha v'samach belibo. He will see you and he will rejoice in his heart. He will not be jealous." And as a reward for Aaron rejoicing for Moshe Rabbeinu's success, Aaron is given the choshen that goes over the heart. And I saw that Rabbi Yankel Galinsky points out, a reward is proportional to the effort. L'fum tzara agra. The choshen was a precious reward. So precious that Korach is in Gehenna for eternity because he wanted that choshen in spite of everything else that he had. That choshen is a significant, prominent reward. So if Aaron HaKohen got the choshen, doesn't mean he was born good with a good heart. Sure, he had a good heart. But a v'racha v'samach belibo, he had to work to get to the level of v'samach belibo. It didn't happen by itself. That means it's possible to do. But what does it hinge on? It hinges on v'racha. You have to see the other person. There are other people around us. It's not all about me as we are naturally inclined. V'racha v'samach belibo. Young lady came to Rabbi Moshe Feinstein Zatzal. Said, "I have a shaila. My mother is not observant. She was married to an American GI who was stationed in England. And the two of them were married with chuppah and kedusha and a proper rav, the whole kit and caboodle. And then they got divorced. They had a secular divorce, but they never had a get. And then my mother went and married somebody else, and I was born from that second union. I became a balas tshuva, and I'm engaged to a yeshiva bacher, and my friend said I might have a problem. They said I should ask you if there's anything, any problem, any impediment to me marrying this yeshiva bacher. So Moshe said to her, "Please tell me the shaila again." So she said, "My mother was married to an American GI station in England. They had a proper chuppah and kedushin. It's been verified. And then they split up with a regular divorce. They did not have a get, and she married somebody else, and I'm from that second union." So Moshe said, "Please come back in 24 hours. I want to look into it." 24 hours later, a young lady came back, and Moshe said to her, "Mazel tov, you could marry the bacher, zol zayin mit glick." Said, "Thank you very much." He gave her a bracha. She walked out. Talmidim were in the room. He said, "Rebbe, we heard what you heard. We heard everything she said. She said it twice. That's a mamzeres lemahadrin. We heard every single thing you heard. How could that possibly be?" Rabbi Moshe said, you're right, you heard what I heard, but you didn't do what I did. In the last 24 hours, I had somebody call the United States Pentagon. And they checked that indeed there was a soldier stationed in England who was married to that woman, an American GI. But simultaneously, he was married to a woman in the United States that had 2 children. If that woman would have known that he was a bigamist and he was married to another woman, she would have never married him in England. It's clearly a mekach tos. There was no marriage. And this young lady may now remarry. So besides the shaila itself, and we realize what we lost when we lost Rabbi Moshe. But obviously, what's the difference between Rabbi Moshe and the Talmidim? Okay, they didn't have the accessibility. But Rabbi Moshe said it's not over yet, and I'm going to make an effort because there's another person there and their life depends on this. And he went the extra mile to call the Pentagon and found out that she's kosher v'yosher can get married. That's what it means that a person, we see other people in our life. If we see other people in our life, that's why they cried, the son and daughter Rabbi Shmuel. They see there's another Jew there, he's in the dark. Who is that person? Sometimes we don't see them at all. We're not even aware there's another Jew there. That's the idea. That's what we're looking to accomplish with the Tisha B'Av. To shake us just a little bit. The Gemara says that Rabbi Yehuda was giving a shir. And in the shir, somebody walked into the room, the Gemara says, and he had eaten garlic. He smelled like garlic. And it was so bad, Rabbi couldn't continue to shir. He said, whoever ate the garlic, please step out. And Rabbi Chia got up and walked out. He was not the one who the odor was coming from. Rabbi Chia got up and he walked out. And everybody in the shir understood what Rabbi Chia was doing, is absorbing the shame and the embarrassment of the real victim, of the real culprit. So everybody else got up and walked out of the room. The next day, Rabbi's son, Rabbi Shimon saw Rabbi Chia. He said, you caused my father a lot of tsar yesterday by walking out because it caused everybody else to walk out. Rabbi Chia said, Chas v'shalom lo tehei kazos b'Yisrael. I couldn't stay in that room and allow that man to be embarrassed, that Talmud to be embarrassed. Machlokas and Shita, obviously, Rebbe held that for the sake of the Bittul Torah, it's his own fault, should not come into shir eating garlic. And if the shir is now disturbed, it's your own fault. Rabbi Chia held, even so, I can't watch another Jew suffer. And he was willing to absorb the shame and the embarrassment of that Jew. Viracha, the concept of seeing somebody else. There's somebody in close proximity. We see that person, viracha, and even a heimer drega is a samach belibo. To rejoice for somebody else's success without any kina. To not feel bad for another person when another person is successful. Because we've got ourselves, we manage to creep into the picture. That's viracha v'samach belibo. The Gemara says, when it talks about somebody who goes to be mesamech a chasan and kala. So the Gemara says somebody who's mesamech a chasan v'mesamcho ki ilubana achas michurvos Yerushalayim. If you go to a chasta, you're mesamech a chasan. And mesamech a chasan, the ikar simcha is to walk over to him and say, she's a magnificent catch. Gemara says, Igra de ve'ilula mili, to tell the chasan, you know what, you got a magnificent catch. And you're willing to do it, you're willing to go to a chasna and be mesamech a chasan and a kala. Pashtus a kala, the Gemara says a chasan. It's as if you rebuilt one of the churvos of Yerushalayim. What's the connection? What's one thing got to do with the other? Why is mesamech a chasan and a kala? It's as if you rebuilt, that's what we want to do right now, rebuild one of the churvos of Yerushalayim. What's one thing got to do with the other? And the answer is that when you go to a chasna, any regular person goes to a chasna, where am I going to sit? What are they going to be serving? Who am I going to be sitting to? And when can I get out of here? And the entire approach to the chasna is me. What's in it for me? And somebody goes to a chasna and goes in mesamech a chasan and a kala. The focus is on them and not on me. That's exactly why Yerushalayim was destroyed. A little too much me focus. The focus is on somebody else without anything being in it for me. It's as if he's rebuilding one of the churvos Yerushalayim. Many of you may remember here in Yerushalayim a couple of years ago, when the streets were shut down because of snow, there was a chasna here in Yerushalayim. The chassan was able to trudge over to the chasna hall. The kala lived in a far neighborhood. They had to bring her a Hatzalah ambulance with snow tires, brought the kala. But what are you going to do? Who's going to come and be misameach the chassan and the kala? And the guests can't get there. They put out word among the local yeshivas and seminaries. Hundreds of bachrim, hundreds of bacharettes stormed that wedding hall and brought simcha to the chassan and the kala. And I have no doubt that that was one chasna where every single person who was there in order to be misameach the chassan and the kala. There was no focus on what are they serving and what are they going to be drinking. It was to be misameach the others. That rebuilds Churvos Yerushalayim. Ask, when I speak to you, I'm speaking to me. Ask yourself, I ask myself, when you get an invitation in the mailbox, a bar mitzvah, a chasna, what are the thoughts that go through our mind? We have a simcha. Instead of suffering and instead of tragedies, there's a simcha announcement in my mailbox. And my thought is, how much time is this going to cost me? And they just made one last year. And how much do I have to spend on a gift now? There's one word that repeated itself 3 times. Me. It's their simcha. I can rebuild Yerushalayim. It's not about me. When Yosef and Binyamin met, after all those years of separation, so Rashi brings down, they cried, they fell on each other's necks, they cried. Torah says they cried. Rashi says Yosef was crying for the Batei Migdash that will be built in Binyamin's Chelek be destroyed. Binyamin was crying for Mishkan Shiloh, which will be built in Yosef's Chelek and be destroyed. The obvious question I'm sure many have asked. You cry about your Beis HaMikdash, you cry about your Mishkan. Why are you crying about his and he's crying about yours? And the answer is because they understand. You know what caused this separation? You know why we were separated for 22 years? Because of the same cause that destroyed the Beis HaMikdash. It was the sinas chinam that separated us, and therefore the only way to rectifying it is by crossing over to the other person. I cry for your Batei Mikdash, you cry for my Mishkan. That's the rectification. That's the way it gets rebuilt. That's the way we rebuild Churvos Yerushalayim. That's one of the things that we're meant to be taking out of Tisha B'Av. There's another idea. And the other idea is probably the Pashut Pshat in the Gemara. Why was it that this son and daughter of Rabbi Yishmael Kohen Gadol, Rabbi Yishmael ben Elisha, were so beautiful? Why was it that they were crying the next day? The sun comes up, the light comes up, and they're crying. I think the answer is that they were crying because they realized what a near miss. Imagine if the plan would have come out, a chiyuv kares, a brother and a sister, and we were just saved by the sun coming up. We were so close to defiling ourselves, and they cried at the near miss. So just imagine a person who's in a room, all by himself, with an internet. It's not even a near miss. How many times does he cry? Should he cry? We're all alone in the dark. Nobody sees what's happening. Rebbeinu Shalom sees. Zima ruined, destroyed the Beis HaMikdash. If a person becomes chas v'shalom defiled by a shifcha, by the lowest of the low, so how many tears should we cry on Tisha B'Av? Person realizes, Tzchatoy ani maskir. If I go near it and it defiles me, I have to cry. Enough said. A Rabbi of mine was at the Kaisel. I don't remember if it was on Tisha B'Av, it was on the day before Tisha B'Av, sometime during the 9 days, might have been on Tisha B'Av itself. A non-Jewish woman approached him. She said to him, "You're a rabbi, aren't you?" He said, "Yes." She said, this is where the temple once stood, isn't it? I said, yes, it is. I said, can I ask you a question? Are there going to be sacrifices here today? A very quick thinking man, he said to her, as of right now, no. But perhaps later today. Perhaps later today, and it wasn't a joke. Hayom im bekolo sishmo, it says. When Rabbi Yeshua ben Levi asked Eliyahu Hanavi, when is Mashiach coming? He said, Hayom. And Rabbi Yeshua ben Levi said, what do you mean? I haven't said a lot of ben Hayoms have passed. Hayom im bekolo sishmo. If you listen, if you obey, if we improve in our bein adam l'chavero, we improve in our bein adam l'makom. If we take Tisha B'Av seriously, people sometimes say, I can't relate to Tisha B'Av. I have trouble relating to Tisha B'Av. In the Dor of Midbar, they dug kvarim, and 15,000 men got in those kvarim every night, and all the men got in the kvarim. 15,000 did not get up the next morning. They did not know if they're going to be alive the next day. Anybody have trouble relating to this year's Tisha B'Av? Nobody has trouble relating. Person doesn't know where he could go, where it is safe, not in the house, not out of the house. Hayomim b'kodlo sishmo. It'll depend on us. If we do what we have to do, Kodesh Baruch Hu will bring all of the Yeshuas that we so much need for Klal Yisrael in so many ways. Sayin Ruchnius, Sayin Gashmius. But it depends on us. Hayomim b'kodlo sishmo.